All right, so to close out today, we've talked a lot this week about how to build our own components. You guys have done an awesome job building all sorts of different interactive components, building components with encapsulated shadow DOM, building your own custom elements, and that's excellent. What I want to talk about now is a little bit about, now that we have those technologies, what does this mean for the larger kind of ecosystem? Right? We talked about modularity and portability. Turns out that once we have that modularity and portability, it means that these components can be shared and used in your applications. It means you don't need to just build your own components. In fact, most of the time you'll probably be using other components. The good news is that it's actually pretty easy to use other components, so there's not a whole lot of learning that has to be done there. But I wanted to go through where you can find components that are currently out there and how you can start using them in your projects. So I don't have slides for this, but I'm going to go through the different sites that you can find galleries of these components that are available. Most of them well, they're all open source. Most of them are, have free open source licenses as well, which means that you can incorporate them into your projects, and they're usually pretty easy to use. So let's go ahead and take a look. The starting point I recommend is webcomponents.org, which is sort of the headquarters for the web components community, where I've already brought this up. I've mentioned that there are articles, presentations, podcasts, resources. This is the home of the Web Components JS polyfill. But there's also this nice little tab in the middle here called Discover. And there are two sections that I want to start with on Discover. The first is customelements.io, and the second is Component Kitchen. And then we'll dive a little bit into Polymer, even though that's for next week. So customelements.io and Component Kitchen, component.kitchen, are both websites that are galleries or registries or directories of existing web components that people have written and uploaded as open source components that they are inviting other people to use. And because components have that portability, that encapsulation, that modularity we've talked about, it means that you can incorporate them into your application without pulling in a special library or framework or anything else. Unlike if you're using Angular or Ember or some other library, you don't need anything special for this. Sort of all comes in the package. All right, so custom elements, we come here and we see a whole bunch of different elements. At the bottom, there's some useful tips on how to use elements. So you can use Bower or NPM. These are a pretty common way to use web components. If we have time tomorrow, we'll talk a little bit about how to incorporate this into your build. But you can also use these components without any of the build process. So let's take a look at some of these popular components. Actually, I'm going to pull up.
But they don't have a super blink tag. No.
They probably don't have a blink tag. I don't know, someone might actually have written one. Someone wrote a custom element for blink.
Sorry, we spoke too
Probably
soon.
not as cool as the ones we built. So if I search chart, I have a few different chart components. Let's take let's see. What do we have here that might be interesting? We have a pie chart. Don't worry that the fact that it says Polymer. So one of the things is because web components are so modular, you'll learn more about Polymer next week, and it's a way you can build applications with web components. But it's also a way that you build components. And so, a lot of times these Polymer components show up in these lists, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to use Polymer for your whole application. It just means that they were built with Polymer. Let me try to find one that's easy to pull in here. Here we go. So this is the chart elements, and you have a few different bar charts here. This is Rob Dotson's GitHub, and he's listed a few of these different elements. So let's go ahead and try to use one. I think that might be helpful. So I'm going to open my IDE. I'm going to make a new folder, and I'll call this we'll call it component demos. And in there, I'll start with one index.html. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a component. components folder as well. And first thing here, when you download this component, let's see. So we have chart pi, and this one's actually using Bower to pull in dependencies. So let's see, I'm trying to think of the easiest way to do this. I'm going to go ahead and quickly demo Bower here. So let's see the component. Have you guys used Bower yet?
Yeah, we used Bower.
Okay.
Not a lot. We used Gulp.
Okay, so let's see. Let's see if I have Bower installed. Looks like I do. Let's see.
I like watching how you work through this.
Makes me feel better? Is that bad? Or-
No, it's just.
No, it's
seeing,
good to
you
see,
know,
yeah, how, because it's like, the reason he's doing it is that he can't pull all the pieces easily, right? You can't just pull it and bring it in. It's got so many dependencies, he's got to go out and get them.
Exactly. So unless I just ran Bower install and I gave it the this chart elements because that's the name of Bower. I knew that from the bower.json. So Bower went ahead and did all the work to include that for me, which is very nice of it. I'm going to delete the component structure. I'm no longer using it. So now I need to include my my chart elements. Specifically, I need to include the chart pi. So going to do an HTML import here. I know how to do that. So I'll do link. No, zoom in here. Link rel equals import, and I'll say Bower components chart elements chart pi. Oops, that defaulted to Bower. I want pi. So cool. I'm gonna do that. And now I see how to use it. I'm gonna go chart values. All right, let's see if this works. Built it up like it will. Look at that, it actually did.
I love the little bounce.
Yeah,
That's
that's
awesome.
nice, easy.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob Dodson. Thanks, he wrote it.
He's
Thank
awesome.
you, Rob
I
Dawson.
love Rob.
So yeah, this is the power of web components. You know, I had to do the Bower install, sure, but my HTML document looks like this.
All right.
This kind of feels like how it's supposed to be, right? Like,
That was really awesome, by the way.
okay,
Yeah.
well,
Nice job.
It's like trying to ride a tricycle and not knowing how, and then somebody gave you training rules, and you're like, oh, I totally do that, right?
you know, you know, we've been sort of building up to this, learning how to build the components, and I understand that can be sort of difficult. And a lot of work went into building this component, and I guarantee, like, once you look under the shadow DOM,
Yeah.
here, right, there's a lot of stuff going on. Well, actually, it's on the canvas. The shadow DOM won't give you much. The script will.
Yeah.
But
Oh, he used Canvas to draw it.
use canvas, yeah, which makes a lot of sense. But it really doesn't matter that canvas was used. Again, think about this is an element defined by its interface, not its implementation. You know, that's what we talked about as being important at the beginning of the week. And I think you see that example here is, you know, values. I can easily change these. Well, let's see if this was, yep. So he has a, what's the callback that he used?
Attribute change.
Attribute change callback, exactly. So I can go ahead and change here. I can change this to 1, and now that's just going to be a sliver. I can change this to 51, you know, whatever. So anyway, and these are built the same way we've been building our components all week. It just happens that in this case it was using, you know, canvas under the hood. Again, didn't have to. There's different ways we could have done this. Okay, so that's one
That
component.
makes so much sense. I mean, the web is screaming for easy code, reusability, shareability.
We get little mouse over things here.
Because there's so many lazy programmers that just, this is my code, don't touch.
Yeah.
Label features?
Yeah, it looks like he's labeled it right too. So you mouse over. Accessibility might be, you know, questionable because it's canvas, but we won't. Actually, it wouldn't be that bad, right? So the accessibility, you know, you wouldn't have an accessibility in terms of, you know, this chunk is this amount, right? But you could potentially be very smart about how you deal with values here, because if you access this via like a screen reader, right, or another device, you know, you do have your values here, and this does describe the entire semantics of what I'm showing. it just doesn't look as visual. Okay, so that's one of them.
So you say these are all open source, we can just.
Yeah, I mean, let's take a look.
Yeah, you look at the license, but generally speaking, licenses,
So this one doesn't actually have a license on it. Oh, no, it does. MIT license.
yeah.
MIT license is super permissive in terms of, so one of the nice things about MIT license is, and I'm not a lawyer, so read the license, but generally it means you can use it in projects that are quote-unquote closed source, so you can use it in like an internal project and not have to worry about it.
Can we revise them? That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Can we change the styling or whatever, or the functionality of it?
So this is the license. It's not that long. I
Absolutely.
suggest
Absolutely.
for like lawyer purposes, reading the actual license, but
Because Rob Dotson works for Google, and it's really his way to help promote use of by giving all these examples and components.
exactly. Yeah, there's a very, I think one of the things we sort of learned on the web is like JavaScript, HTML. It's all open source anyway, in the sense that like it's all out in the browser, and so it doesn't really help much to hide it too much.
Can we take just a quick tangent and Google the web ahead? The web ahead, Rob Dotson. You can just go right there. Rob Dotson should bring up the episode, but go right there. And then if you go down to 96, wait, where is the, just Control F, Rob.
It's not on this page. We can find it after and
Alright.
and send it out. It's a good podcast, I'm guessing. But
Yeah.
Well, that's
Cool.
kind of why I was like, oh, we totally got to do web components when I heard that podcast.
Yeah.
Rob Dotson.
yeah, he's the
He's an evangelist, there is no doubt about it,
Yeah.
but you understand why.
All right, so let's try to find something else, because that was pretty quick, right? I think, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes to searching for a component and getting a chart on a page. So that's pretty good. Maybe less than that if I didn't hesitate on Bower for a
I
second.
thought
Maybe.
that was really good.
So let's try to find something else. Google Map, this is actually a really interesting component. Google has a set of web components for their APIs. So this is the Google Map component. It's a little more advanced of a component. So what I will do is look up the Bower JSON here, Google-map. That's how I know what it is. So Bower install Google-map. Just gonna go ahead and do that install. The reason I have to use Bower, and I don't have to, I can do it by hand, but there are dependencies that these components have. Unable to find. Okay, so it's actually using Polymer under the hood. So I'm going to the latest version. Okay. So so again, you don't have to worry about the fact that it's using Polymer. This is the beauty of web components. Next week you'll learn all about Polymer and how to use it, how to leverage it to build your own applications. But if you want to use the components out of the box, that's fine. So I'll take a demo here. Actually, well, we can find out what the lat launch of where this is. So I'm going to set Google Map, and the only thing I have to do here that's special, and I know because I've used this component before, but also because it tells me in the documentation, is that I do have to give it a height because it's a map, and otherwise it doesn't know how high it's supposed to be. So let's reload this, and the reason it's not working, anyone know what I forgot to do? What was that? Import, yep. So, our components, Google-map, and let's see what I have to do, Google-map.html. Cool. I just have to import the HTML file. And the nice thing with imports is I don't have to include like a CSS file and a JavaScript file. I just can include one file. There I got my map. But we're not in San Francisco, so we're way down here. You'll actually notice my lat launch is updating.
Yeah, that's nice.
Where's Fresno? You're gonna tell me if I'm
Go up, right. You see there, right next to hell?
where is
To the right.
To the right.
to the right, to the right, to the right. There we go. Look at that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna actually
Hell, Fresno, close. That's it.
I'm gonna take these here.
Hey, we live here, come on now.
I'm gonna put these in my lat launch. because like that. I'll open it up in a new tab here, and I start with the first one to start. Very cool. Yeah, so that's that. I can actually add some new features in here too. Google Maps pretty, the API is pretty good. We'll talk a little bit about, if we have tomorrow, about creating a good API.
Yeah.
This is a really good example of documentation here. These are properties. We've talked about properties. We've done this before. There are methods. We've talked about doing methods. Things like start and stop on our blink element. So we could do resize here if we want to explicitly resize the map. We could clear all our markers from the map if we had markers on it. And we talked about events, right? We talked about custom events. If we have a time for APIs tomorrow, we'll talk about a custom event set that the maps can actually fire in this case. So the map will actually tell me when it's being dragged, or when I'm mousing over, or when I've right-clicked on it, things like that. So these are really, this is the API for the component. And again, while it's implemented with Polymer here, we don't really need to even know that, right? Like, looking at this, you don't know that it's implemented with Polymer. This just looks like a normal web component that we've used so far. All right, let's go to Component Kitchen. You can go to Catalog. I haven't actually used Component Kitchen in a while. It looks like they've redesigned some of the page. Also looks like it's not loading. Here we go. So again, there's some more elements here. Hey, look, someone wrote a carousel. Looks familiar.
Right, hey, awesome, no more jQuery. You want a carousel, you just need code for a carousel, that's it.
Now, something to be aware of here, though, is that because web components are encapsulated like this, and we don't really know what happens under the hood, sometimes components pull in more dependencies than they should have. Remember that dependency problem that we saw.
Right.
So a component can actually pull in jQuery, and you wouldn't necessarily know it right away.
Okay, never mind.
But just to be
when you run
kind
your
of fair
value,
there,
because you can look at the package JSON to see what it's dependent on.
so let's do Chessboard. This is actually kind of a cool component. Anyone play chess? Few? Yeah, I play a little bit. I'd probably lose if I played to any of you. But there's notation, right? It's like this really crazy notation for the state of a chessboard at any one time. But I'm pretty sure this is used outside of, this is a pretty common notation, yeah. So at least in how we programmatically can define these. So this is actually being a little more helpful in this, how I would include things. But I'll go ahead and Bower install Chessboard. See if that's actually a registered component. Looks like it is. It's going to install some stuff. I can import it. It's being kind enough to tell me I need the import this time. And let's go ahead and use it. Actually, I don't want that out of the box, though. I want something that's. Let's do the scholars meet here. All right, do that. We'll go here. We'll reload. That didn't work. Let's see why. My HTML import failed, and that's because I had that there. If I reload, now we're saying HTML import is not defined. Alright, so this looks like something is broken. Let's try with one more time. It did mention having to pull in the web components polyfill. It looks like this might be an older version, so that might be why it's not working. But we'll try just very quickly pulling in this polyfill. Fortunately, I already have it available. So, pull it in demos. It's one of the things to keep in mind. Most of the time it works. I'm sharing a couple of examples where it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Either because it's older, or something went wrong. It needs this tracer runtime. It's kind of frustrating.
So Bower is pretty much like NPM.
Gulp.
So Gulp is different. Bower and NPM are similar in that they're both package managers, and they handle dependencies and packages. Gulp is similar to something like Grunt. There we go. So I had another dependency here. I just sort of skipped the steps that I probably should have followed. It looks like it's written in ES6, and that's the problem. It wasn't working, and so it needed that runtime. One of the things you'll note again is there's an API here. We have some options. We have some methods. So if I did something like this, let's see, move. Looks like I can move a piece. So if I went to my component here, this is SVG actually, so you can see if I look at this, again, all hidden under the shadow DOM. I don't see any of that from the outside, but if I dive into it, I'll see that I have it here. And actually it's a table too, which my guess is this is for accessibility, which is pretty sweet. Or just for the letters on the side here. But either way, it's pretty cool. Actually, SVG is pretty accessible because it's just elements. All right, so let's see if I wanted to. Well, probably get a piece from here. This is B2. I want to put B2 to B3, so I can say B2 to B3. Ah, it didn't work. Oh, because board, I wasn't selecting board. To select my element, and then I'll say $0. There we go. I just moved the font. All right. So move it to B4 there. Watch it. There you go. All right. So I'm not going to go too much more into this for today, but I wanted to open up to kind of these two locations that you can use to find different components. You can also click on the Polymer catalog, and that's going to bring you to all of the Polymer components. For some reason, the silence seems to be off. I think it's my version of Chrome. It actually has links to the Google Web Components, the things like the map that we just saw, as well as different elements that it has sort of categorized in these elements categories. It has the paper elements. You'll learn more, I think, next week about Polymer and paper and all of their elements. But again, you can use these without using Polymer or without explicitly using Polymer. They may be using Polymer under the hood, but the nice thing in web components is that level of encapsulation and modularity, so you don't need to actually worry about that. So that's how you can explore components. If you have time tonight, spend some time looking at components, find something that's interesting to you, throw it on your page, give it a try, see what it looks like, see if you can use methods on it. Start looking at what other people have implemented as components, and I think that's a good way to start thinking about what you might want to implement and how they could work together. Remember, components are composable, so we can use them together. So that's all for now. Take a look at components and give them a try.